This week on Life and Faith.
I was in Thessalonica, and it's a tiny regional airport. I was just waiting for my bags in baggage claim. And as I looked up, just on the poles, there was all of these posters of these missing women, missing children. There were just so many of them that I couldn't ignore it.
The systems that we trust in to know have broken down.
You know that the local social services are in trouble because they're phoning us. We've already got 6 kids in the house.
But I've learned that even when it doesn't go well, I can be okay.
What's the best way to understand the world and to live in it?
This is Life and Faith from CPX. I'm Simon Smart. And today I'm speaking with Christine Cain, who is an author, a very popular speaker, and an activist, among other things. She's also the co-founder and now chief advocate of A21, which is an organisation that exists to fight against modern slavery. Now, this was a big focus of our conversation, but woven into A21, in fact, crucial to that unfolding story, is Christine's personal story, and the way her own significant challenges opened her up to a life of speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves. Christine is an Aussie, you'll be able to tell that, but she lives with her family in the US these days and has done for a number of years. I love this conversation and Christine's passion, humour and energy for the cause as she fights for justice. Now, this interview is part of our CPX Conversations series on Facebook and YouTube. I recommend those to you. We've had Andy Crouch, Justine Toe and Mark Stevens so far. You can catch up on those. But we couldn't have had our podcast listeners miss out on Christine Cain. So here she is. And I began by asking her about living in the US, anything she had to adjust to and the best parts of that experience.
A couple of the challenges were, watching things like the World Series baseball, and the sort of world started in Seattle. It went across to New York, down to Miami and stopped at LA. And I was like, wow, World Series. Okay. And the World Super Bowl. So some of those things, I found a little bit difficult to get used to, but I love it. I travel in and out of here a lot. I mean, this last year, obviously because of COVID, I've been in this country for solidly for a year. So it's the first time that I've actually really felt that I've lived here, even though I moved 10 years ago, because, we have 19 A21 offices all around the world. So I've always just been in and out. And so it was really different actually being here 365 days a year for a year. Us Aussies are a little bit more laid back, I think, and I miss that. Someone asked me the other day, what do you miss most about Australia? I said, oh man, just not having people that get my sense of humour, people that are not going to be offended because, we're just a little bit cynical down under. We're a little bit, we've just got to, and I tend to offend people here with what I think is really funny. And you would think is really funny, Simon, but a lot of people here don't think it's funny.
Yeah, well, it's so good to talk to you. I do want to talk to you about A21. Now, there's a few organisations now in this space now, isn't there? And I guess that's a reflection really of this is a very serious, real problem now.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think when I say it probably always has been, it's just there's more and more people becoming aware of that, which is crucial. And, the truth is we need all of the organisations that are involved, because when you're talking, I think current statistics are up to 40 million slaves, depending on how you measure that, but 40 million slaves in the world today. There is a lot of work to be done, and we need all hands on deck in different capacities to stop this. Now, Simon, I'm going to say right from the outset, I'm one of those hope-filled people, because I'm like, there's 40 million slaves and 7.8 billion people in the world. So to actually, we have a statement at A21. It says, let's abolish slavery everywhere forever. Some people roll their eyes, but I'm like, this is not rocket science. There's 7.8 billion people and 40 million slaves. Do the math. If we awaken enough people to this, and then we are prepared to change our lives a little bit, I think we can actually get this job done.
Yeah, I was struck by that. It's a very bold statement, kind of idealistic in a way, but it's good to hear that you actually think this is achievable and you're working towards that. But let's come back to some of that in a moment, but tell us how it started, because I think that's an interesting story. And like many of us, you were not initially, aware of how serious this problem was. But what was it that captured you to the extent that you wanted to not just, contribute something, but start an organisation?
Sure. And let me just go back even one step, that it wasn't that I was unaware of the enormity of the problem. I was just unaware that it existed. So I'm sure some people that are going to be watching this and listening to us, this is going to be new to them. And this is what, for those of us that have been in the space for a long time, it's easy to assume that everybody knows about human trafficking, modern day slavery, whatever language you want to use it. But I found most people actually don't know that it exists. They're just like I was 14 years ago. 14 years ago, I didn't know this existed. I was about to speak at a conference in a town in the north of Greece called Thessalonica. I'm Greek Australian, so if I say Greek words, they're going to have the Greek.
And we'll defer to you for the pronunciation for sure.
I was in Thessalonica, and as I was waiting, it's a tiny regional airport. I was just waiting for my bags and baggage claim. And as I looked up, just on the poles, there was all of these posters of these missing women, missing children. There were just so many of them that I couldn't ignore it. I'm like, and of course I've advocated for women for decades. So I'm looking at that. At the time I was 40 years old. I had just had my second child. And as I was looking at all of these faces of all of these children, wondering what was going on, I saw a little girl about the same age as one of my daughters, and her name was Sophia, which was the same name as one of my daughters. And this is, Simon, I guess this is probably the way that I could tell people, for me, how it happened. I would say that's when, the seed for what is now this global anti-trafficking organization, this is where it was planted. I looked, and I went in that moment from looking at someone else's missing child to seeing what could have been my own daughter. And Simon, when you look at anything in the world, you can look away. But when you see, you can never really unsee. And that's the difference. And I think at that moment, so that was in, I think about 2006, 2007 was when I first became aware. A21 didn't start till 2008, but that was where the journey began. Because I knew nothing about it. I went on, my friend was the deputy director of UNICEF, and she went on to explain to me that these were the alleged victims of human trafficking, to which my response was, what do you mean human trafficking? That can't still happen. We've got the Emancipation Proclamation Act. We've got the Freedom from Slavery Act. We had William Wilberforce. We're like, this does not happen. And I'm sure people watching this today think exactly the same thing. Like, what do you mean? We think since the transatlantic slave trade was eradicated, that somehow this doesn't happen. Modern day slavery looks different, but there are actually more slaves in the world today than ever before in the history of humanity.
It's a terrifying thought, isn't it?
Yes.
And I'm really struck by the kind of the humanity of it, and the description there of when you see the face and kind of connect with that person, all of a sudden it's no longer a statistic. You're engaged.
I love how you say that. My own birth certificate, and I think this is where it gets a little bit personal for me, is I found out at 33 that I was born in Crown Street Women's Hospital down there, downtown Sydney. But I was left in the hospital unnamed and unwanted. My birth certificate actually doesn't have a name on it. It says child's name, unnamed, number 2508 of 1966. Yeah. And, it's interesting, Simon, that numbers, like I say 40 million slaves. And if you're listening to this, it's easy to switch off because numbers are numbing. Numbers are dehumanizing, they're desensitizing. And the truth is, it's so easy to ignore suffering when it's nameless or faceless. But the minute you put a name or a face on a number, like if I said to you, number 2508 of 1966, you'd just kind of go, okay. But the minute you go, Christine Cain, it changes. And so not one of these 40 million slaves is just a number. And here is the deal, Simon. I'm the daughter of Greek immigrants, and if I was not born in Sydney, Australia in 1966, where there was a rule of law and a proper adoption system set in place, I this is how close I am to the kids that I'm helping to rescue. I'm only 1 degree of separation, because if I was born in perhaps Albania or Romania or even in the north of Greece where I was, and, my parents were Greek immigrants, I could be one of the very children that I am helping to rescue today. Oftentimes it's a number, but many times we're just 1 or 2 degrees of separation from this. And I find often that if something, it was the girl's name, Sophia, that grabbed my attention. And then as I began to read the stories and I saw my own stories, I could no longer ignore this. I had to do something.
As I listen to that story, I'm interested in the notion of calling, feeling a call to do something, and the way in which your own experiences play into that. And you've described that really well. Is this something you have felt the calling for?
Yeah, I could say that now. I can't say that like when I was young. But I will say that I've always sensed a calling, whatever language you want to put on that, for matters of justice. I remember, I think part of that could also be tied into growing up in Blacktown in Sydney, Australia, the only Greek ethnic minority immigrant. Things are very different in Australia now, but in the 1970s, when I was growing up, the 1980s, we were extremely marginalised, being part of the Greek community, extremely marginalised because of our ethnicity. And it was really hard. It was very, very difficult. So I knew what it was like to be marginalised, to be left out, to not be part of mainstream culture, to be overlooked, to be ignored. Those feelings are visceral to me. I think finding out at 33 that I was adopted, that I wasn't who I thought I was, again, was deeply formative in helping, to form who I am today. I mean, to find out that your entire history is not what you thought it was, that your entire family is not what you thought it was, it can be extremely destabilizing. And again, when you tie this into perhaps, I'll add one other component to that. And of course, I was the victim of sexual abuse for about 12 years when I was a child. So when you now look at the survivors that we're helping, of course, sexual abuse is a huge component of that story. Marginalisation, being overlooked, being ignored, being abandoned. I could just see how many fragments of my own story have worked. What could have actually destroyed me, I've seen some of those things turned round, and they're used to fuel me, hopefully from a healthy place, to really be able to make a difference in the world. But I think so. From when I was a kid, I remember it being at Blacktown High School, and there was just a couple of us immigrant kids, and I just knew things weren't right. I didn't have language around it back then, but I knew when I grew up and had agency, I wanted to be in a position where I could help kids like me that were marginalised and help people find a voice and help people know their value. So I think part of that was my immigrant experience. I think coming from an abuse background, my heart was always towards the victimised and the marginalised. It was just a natural outflow. And then I think just the abandonment, the adoption is just another thread. When you see all of those things woven together, it kind of makes sense. And I think sometimes your greatest calling can come out of some of your hardest experiences in your life.
This is Life and Faith, and I'm speaking with Christine Cain, co-founder and now chief advocate for the anti-slavery organisation A21. As you heard, this started when Christine was bowled over, not just by the scale of human trafficking today, but that it existed at all. A21 has grown and evolved, and I wanted to know more about its approach and its various activities.
We have a three-pronged approach, which is to reach the vulnerable, to rescue the victim, and to restore the survivors. And so you're talking, that's everything from, creating programs, and we have so many that truly reach hundreds of millions of people around the world. We have programs like Can You See Me campaign, which reaches the vulnerable. We have everything from movies on showing people how trafficking exists. If you go to airports around the world, Sydney, UK, all around the world, you will see films that we have made, short films in baggage claim or posters in baggage claim. called Can You See Me, helping you to identify the victims of trafficking in plain sight with hotline numbers to help people go. Like I stood there in 2006 or 7 and I didn't know what to do. Yeah. But now you can stand at a baggage claim at Heathrow Airport and you got to watch something go, oh, wow. Oh, I think I saw something. There's a number to call. I mean, we're trying to constantly put practical things in people's hands. We have set up national hotlines in 5 countries around the world. We have Bodies Are Not Commodities. It's an education program where we start from kindergarten level, because in some countries, this is such a part of the culture that you've got to change the mindsets right from early education to teach people that bodies are not commodities to be bought and sold in about 35 countries in the world, from the Ukraine to Greece to Bulgaria. This program operates in schools, taking people through just the value of human beings and that bodies are not commodities. And I think that's something we are really, really excited about. That helps education, prevention, awareness. We have a global walk for freedom that happens every year. Of course, 2020, it didn't happen because of COVID, but 2019, we had 553 walks in 59 countries around the world. It's kind of like the new year, where it starts in New Zealand, and then for 24 hours, it goes country to country, all around, people walking in single file through major cities around the world, every major city around the world, which is a great awareness and prevention thing. Lots of things like that. You can see that. And then we have, obviously, our restoration program. We have freedom centres in several countries around the world. And probably our aftercare is what we would be most known for. Some of the programs we have to work with survivors that are all trauma-informed and survivor-led programs that we've cultivated over the last several years have really helped to restore holistically the survivor. And of course, survivors have been trapped, and when they're trafficked, the last thing they want to do is be kept held in another home in some sort of program. So we really help with helping them to get set up in independent housing, have freedom centres that they can come to every day to help with education, job skills, of course, all of their physical, their medical, their emotional needs being met. And so that holistic approach means that our statistics in terms of victims being re-victimized or survivors going back into trafficking is comparatively so low, because we're really setting them up to win and move forward. And a lot of our programs, we are getting so much input from survivor-led organizations that have been so helpful.
It's an amazing amount of activity, but it's obviously a complex problem. It needs a complex solution. And I love that. I think it's a very, I've noticed this in lots of aid activity now, where there's this recognition that it's not just a matter of turning up and handing out money or food or whatever. There's a complex sort of as you say, holistic a need and approach that's required. And in this situation, even more, as you described that, I can see why all of those steps are needed. Has it given you, are there good stories that have come out of this? Have you sort of felt encouraged by what's you've been able to achieve as an organisation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish we had 3 hours. I need everyone to go to a21.org and have a look at survivor stories, because it will inspire you to go, it does make a difference. Sometimes you go, are we really making a difference? But I could tell you about survivors that have come out, and one in particular that is graduating from university. Some of these countries I won't talk about, but we have got survivors that have come through. And, they had dreams. And when they went to certain countries under the guise they thought they were going to work and get jobs, and they were tricked and, sold into slavery. So their dreams turned into nightmares. Well, it's a great joy to be able to restore those dreams and go, I know that there was that devastation. But again, there's that redemption piece, and seeing them fulfill dreams that they had to become nurses. Well, I could tell several that have come through different university programs, a nurse, a psychologist, a social worker, and again, with most of them, they want to give back and serve. So many stories of young women coming out and starting their own businesses. We have a very a great, robust sort of entrepreneurial program for them to be a social enterprise program to start businesses and to watch them flourish. And I could tell you stories of survivors that have come out and gotten married and started families, and you would not have thought this would be possible after the trauma that they had encountered. So across, from education to jobs, lots of restoration with their children. We do a lot of legal representation, and the amount of mothers that have been separated from their children, and just the complexities when you've crossed borders, and the legal process to restore families is a huge thing. I mean, there's just story after story. So there is not even a week. There's not a day that doesn't go by that there isn't a story. I mean, we're in 16 countries. There's 19 offices. So there's stories from children as young as 18 months old to, we had a case of forced labor up in Bulgaria, several men, all in their 60s. So, I could, in any week, it's from an 18-month-old child to people in their late 60s, forced labor, sex trafficking, forced begging, domestic servitude. I mean, it's just nonstop. But you hear the rescues, you hear the restoration, and it gets you out of bed for another day.
I bet it does. Now, tell me, though, what has this, for you, sort of taught you about the human heart, the human condition? Because there's a very dark side to this story too, isn't there?
Very. There's no doubt about it. I don't know. I say to people that say to me, Christine, I don't believe that there's evil, or I don't believe there's a hell, or I don't believe there's a devil, or, whatever in that category. Yeah. I think, well, you obviously have never worked in helping to abolish slavery, because 5 minutes into this, reading some of the reports that I read that I could never publicly put, it would just so traumatize people. The only way that I can reconcile that kind of depravity and the kind of evil that human beings would subject other human beings to is for in my paradigm, there has to be a dark side. There is evil, there is a devil, and there is a hell, because it is so dark, that underbelly that drives this, whether which of course is, sex, power, money, greed, lust, all all of the things that
and cruelty,
we'd love to just cover up, but it's there. It's so evil and cruel, and just that one human being could do that physically to another human being is beyond comprehension.
Yeah. Now, I wonder how your faith has kind of informed and shaped your approach to this work, and also how you processed it.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think for me personally, my faith undergirds my approach to it all. Because of my faith in Jesus, I see and recognize what I believe to be the innate image of God in every person, wherever they're from, whatever their nationality, their religion, their socioeconomic background, their ethnicity, their race, their culture. I believe that every human being is created in the image of God. And I think as that starting point, it means then every human being should have access to fundamental human rights. No human being should be bought and sold and used for the pleasure or be exploited, by another human being. And so when you say, where does my faith tie into this? My faith is the whole reason I believe all of this, and will certainly spend my life to continue to, reach the vulnerable, to rescue the victim, and to restore the survivor. It doesn't matter what your gender is, your ethnicity is, your socioeconomic background is, what your faith belief system is or isn't. every human being has the right to freedom. And I think we should all, this is certainly a humanitarian issue that whatever your background is, I think we can all get behind and work together. And I find that's why we can work in countries. I work in the Middle East, we work in Southeast Asia, we work across Asia, South America, Africa, up throughout Europe, and there's people of all different faith systems. And yet the one thing we can all agree on is that this is wrong. And for me, the reason I find that it is wrong is my faith informs that.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful how you've expressed the way in which this is a human problem. And so your faith is driving your activity, but it includes and welcomes and brings in not people of all sorts of beliefs and none, presumably. Well, tell us, you are a very passionate Bible teacher and promoter of Christian faith, though. So I want to ask you, this is a slightly different question. What is your sense of what people in the secular West think Christian faith is about? And how different is that from what you want people to know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think particularly at this time in history, I think there's a lot of mixed feelings towards what Christian faith may or may not be. I think I grew up in an era before there was an internet or a social media. So I think maybe people might have had a better idea of what the Christian faith was. I think it's a free-for-all out there now. And so depending on what's come across your screen, the kind of people you follow on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter will pretty much determine what you think of the Christian faith. And, I think that there's been a lot of negativity. People professing perhaps to be Jesus followers have not necessarily represented the Jesus of the gospel, the Jesus of the Gospels in the scriptures in the way that would truly reflect his beauty and his love and his grace and his goodness and his kindness. And I would sort of say to people, don't go looking for Jesus on social media. Go to the Bible, go to the Gospels, and see for yourself that's what I'm thinking. Like I keep trying to say, don't even listen to me. Go straight to the book. And there is just so much confusion out there. I think the world is so divided. There's so much chaos. There's so much anger. And fear is what drives anger. We're living in a global pandemic. We're living in political upheaval, economic upheaval, sociological upheaval. And when there's upheaval and change, fear is the response. And when fear is the response, people just vent out of fear. And I think that's what we're seeing on social media. So we are seeing the worst sides of a lot of people right now. And I think 5 years from now, a lot of people are going to think, I wish I never did that. And can we just eradicate all of that? So I keep trying to say to people, please, if you're coming to really want to examine who is this Jesus, go to the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and read for yourself who this man is. And he is someone that so radically changed my life. He took this unnamed, unwanted, abused, adopted girl from the back of Sydney, Australia. And, not only saved me and healed me, but then he's given me the awesome opportunity to be able to give back into this world and to promote his goodness and his justice. He so radically changed my life that I want everyone to know it. And you said, I'm a very vocal proponent of the Christian faith. It's because I think when you truly encounter Jesus, not the Christian subculture that we often see out there that is just so divisive and chaotic, and it just so misrepresents who Jesus is. But when you truly encounter his love, his grace, his goodness, his kindness, he can, it changes everything. So you can have a background like mine and over a process find healing and restoration. And my history didn't need to define my destiny, but my past can be used to help other people have a future. And that's the power of the gospel. That and Jesus, it was his love and his grace and his mercy that has helped bring healing and wholeness to me, and has helped 35 years later help me to continue to hopefully do good. And, one of the simple scriptures in the Bible, it says Jesus of Nazareth went about healing many and doing good. And, can I just say to you all, if it doesn't sound good, if it doesn't look like Jesus, sound like Jesus, taste like Jesus, it's not Jesus. If it's just junky religion that's very angry and bitter and negative and critical and judgmental and legalistic, or just sells out to a system of success and fame and money, and that's not the Jesus of the Gospels. The Jesus of the Gospels is one full of love and grace and mercy and truth and peace and goodness and kindness. It's not sappy. He'll confront injustice, and that's what puts the fire in my bones to go, no, that's not just, and we need to fight for justice. And there's no greater emancipator of people, of the marginalised, of the poor, and of women than Jesus Christ of Nazareth. No greater emancipator on earth.
This has been Life and Faith with me, Simon Smart. Thanks so much today to Christine Cain. If you'd like to know more about A21, a recipient of the Mother Teresa Memorial Award, you can go to their website, a21.org, where you can read about and perhaps get involved in their work. Also, if you'd like to check out Christine's several books, including her latest How Did I Get Here, we'll put a link in the show notes. Please do share this episode with someone you know who might be interested, and we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@publicchristianity.org and give us some feedback. Next week.
Hey, how y'all doing? I'm Ted Lasso, your new coach. You must be Miss Welton.
Oh, please, call me Rebecca. Miss Welton's my father.
If that's a joke, I love it. If not, I cannot wait to unpack that with you.